Join us by the fireside for our evening tales of true life's strange experiences with things that lie beyond the veil of the known and into the misty depths of the mysterious and unknown. Taiwanese Marine Story. My dad served in the Taiwanese Marines as a drill sergeant. Much of the ground in Taiwan saw violence under occupation, and it was rumored that his base was built on or near a mass grave. So, needless to say, he's had a few paranormal stories. He had a guy report to him in the morning, exhausted but frazzled, the night before. He had been on guard duty, overlooking the firing range. The targets on the range happened to be a mix of clay and wood figures, cut and drawn to look like an enemy soldier aiming a rifle at you. According to the guard, when he'd been bored out of his mind staring out over the range, he saw clear as day one of the clay soldiers wearily lay down his rifle and exclaim, "Damn, I'm tired." The guard said he passed out from fright. During the evening, when training was over, the sergeants, for the most part, had the time to themselves. My dad liked to go out hunting during dusk when the heat was rising from the ground. So one evening he sets out, carrying some of his stuff, a nice long stick and a flashlight. As he was making his way across the field, he was zigzagging in a search pattern, and he found himself getting closer and closer to an old, decrepit outhouse that had been abandoned as it was too far from the main base. So as he got within a few yards of it, he was suddenly hit with a feeling of intense apprehension. Something told him going near the outhouse was just a bad idea. At that moment, his flashlight aimed right at the construct, and it went out. He fiddled with the battery, smacked it, thought, hell, better get a new battery, and turned around to head back. The moment he turned and faced the main base, the flashlight flickered back on. Great, time to keep hunting. The moment he turned to face the outhouse, it flickered off again. Faced the base, it flickered on. He did this 2 or 3 times, got the message, verbally apologized for intruding, turned, and walked calmly back to base. The base itself was surrounded by forest and mountains, the natural terrain of Taiwan. One day, a soldier was reported missing. As the day went on, it was clear that he'd either deserted or was in serious trouble. A manhunt rescue team was organized, and most of the base was out searching for the guy as the rain started to come in. As night fell, they just called it off. They called the search party off, and they got ready to try again tomorrow. They found him in the morning, huddled in a wet, dark cave, scared, speechless, and out of his mind. No one was sure what he saw to cause him to freak out, and they never found out. They shipped the guy out soon afterwards. Finally, one of his years on the base, it was hit with a huge typhoon. Typhoons are pretty regular in Taiwan, especially during the summer, but this one was going to set records. Everyone hunkered down and reinforced the base as best they could, and it held well. And after days of relentless rain and wind, they emerged to survey the damage. One of the trees on the base had been hundreds of years old. It sat on a hill and overlooked the base, and so had been the site of a Buddhist shrine set at its roots. Now the roots twisted and turned into the air. The storm had torn the tree from the ground, and yet the shrine itself was untouched. Even the red silk covering, with nothing weighing it down, hadn't moved an inch, despite the winds that had finally torn the great tree from its hill after hundreds of years. The soldiers took this as a sign that despite whatever would be thrown against them, their spirit would remain strong and unmoved. One can only attempt to imagine what that poor man must have seen that just caused him to, lose his mind and just slip into insanity. I mean, obviously it was something very terrifying, but who knows? Person out alone in the woods like that, in a wild place, you just don't know. Could be anything. But I love the end where the soldiers took the sign of the Buddhist temple that was still standing, as a good omen, good sign for themselves to remain strong and unmoved. That was nice. Graveyard shift in the cemetery. As a Marine, I used to have the graveyard patrol shift at the Beirut bombing memorial. Part of the memorial is dedicated to a veterans cemetery. Strangely enough, I never really got freaked out being completely alone in a remote cemetery in the middle of the night, surrounded by dense woods on all sides. It was actually kind of peaceful and, kind of gave me a break, to be honest. However, one night I was patrolling near the perimeter fence where some of the oldest headstones are when I suddenly heard the sound of a woman humming. I followed the sound and then I noticed a light glowing through the vines and brush of a large tree. As I approached, I could literally feel the hair beginning to lift on the back of my neck as if there was an electric current in the air. So I pushed aside the brush, and what I saw nearly took my breath away. It was an old weathered headstone with a large cross etched into the marble. Only the cross was glowing a bright, vivid blue like a neon bulb. The humming was also suddenly much louder, and it had a weird plurality to it, like it was coming from hundreds of voices at once. Needless to say, I freaked the hell out. I screamed like a scared little girl and sprinted back to the parking lot. I radioed the guard who was supposed to relieve me and forced him to come early, then spent the rest of my shift in the cab of his truck. I don't think he believed me, but he stayed in his truck and didn't go out on patrol until the sun was fully up. A few days later, I worked up the nerve to return to the grave, during the day, of course. As I suspected, in the light of day, it was completely mundane headstone. There was no name, only the aforementioned cross. I ran my hands over the stone and checked to see if maybe there was some sort of hidden light source or solar panel or something, but no, it was just plain, solid, unremarkable stone. The humming was gone, too. So I eventually returned to my normal shift, but never again experienced anything out of the ordinary. I never learned whose grave that was either, but I find myself thinking about it from time to time. It really sounds absurd when I say it out loud, and I suppose it could have been a hallucination or a trick of my tired brain, but I don't believe it was. I think it was real, a ghost or spirit of some sort, but I don't think it was malevolent at all. That sounds actually like quite a spiritual experience. I wondered who was buried there. It would be fascinating to know who it was and, you know, whatever information could have come up about their lives and what they did in their lives and so on. But yeah, that definitely sounds like it was something quite special that happened to you. The possessed teenage girl. This is a long one, but I'll truly never forget it. About 5 years ago, I was a Mormon missionary serving in Nebraska. My companion and I were at church one Sunday, and it was a typical Sunday. We said hi to all the families we saw in the halls and foyers. There was one 13-year-old girl in the ward named Mary. She was one who always had some sort of snack made up for us each week that she gave us at church. Normally, she was always so nice and polite and always took any opportunity to say hi to us. She was walking towards us in the hall that morning, And I noticed that she was super pale and had this sort of wide eyed look to her eyes, and she was just staring straight ahead without blinking. So it was really strange and uncharacteristic. As we were walking by, I said, "Hey, Mary, how are you today?" I got no response. She just ignored me. She didn't even look at us. Red flag went up because she would never do something like that. So after church, I told my companion that I wanted to talk to Mary's mom to see if everything was okay. When we found her mom, I could tell that she was uneasy and she just looked worried and nervous. I asked her, and she immediately started crying. We told her that we would stop by their house immediately after church and see if we could talk with Mary and her family. When we got to her house, I just had kind of an eerie feeling. I asked my companion if he felt the same, and he agreed. Something was just off. Mary's mom answered the door and sat us down in the living room. We asked her if everything was okay with Mary. She was at a loss for words for a moment and just told us that she didn't know, that there was something going on, but she didn't know exactly what it was. She said that the past week that Mary acted mad and disgusted towards her family, and she was just, acting really strange and very much unlike her. Mind you, this family is one of the closest families I've ever seen. She said that Mary randomly attacked her older brother one day in the week, and she just started punching and kicking him, which she's never done before. Her mom couldn't understand this sudden change in her attitude and this rage. We asked if we could talk to Mary and see if we could get anything out of her. From the couch we were sitting on, we could see down the hallway where the bedrooms were. As soon as I saw Mary coming out of her room, and as she started walking down the hallway, I immediately had a feeling that I can't fully describe. It was the worst feeling I've ever felt. I can honestly say that one word that kind of describes it is evil. Mary had the same wide eyed look that she had in the church. She sat down in the chair in front of us and just stared at the wall in front of her. I asked her if everything was okay. She didn't answer, and I asked her if she was mad at her family and why she had attacked her brother. She finally stopped staring at the wall and looked at me. There was this awful feeling I had when she looked at me, and it got worse when she looked at me and said that she was told to hurt him. I asked her who told her, and she said that the voices told her to hurt her family and leave. I asked her if she knew where the voices were coming from, and she didn't answer. I asked her mom if we could give her a blessing, and she immediately said yes. When we gave her a blessing, she didn't resist at all. She just sat there. After we gave her the blessing, the mood immediately changed. Mary no longer had a wide eyed, glazed look about her. Her color was starting to come back, and she was breathing heavily. And that awful, evil feeling that I had felt before just suddenly went away. As male missionaries, we aren't allowed to hug females, but after a few minutes had gone by, Mary gave me a very big hug, and I wasn't about to fight it. When we left their house and got in our car, my companion and I just sat there for a few minutes, thinking about what the hell had just happened. He finally broke the silence and said, "I don't like the feeling I had in there." I told him that I felt the same way. We checked up on her the next Sunday at church, and she was back to being the happy go lucky Mary that everyone knew. We asked her mom how everything was at home, and she said it was like nothing happened. A few weeks later, I asked Mary if she remembered anything about it. She said that all she could remember was something that was, vaguely in her thoughts, and it was about her attacking her brother and not knowing why. And that after we gave her the blessing, it was like she just woke up from a bad dream. Being a religious person, you hear stories about demons and possessions in the scriptures and in stories, and there are the countless movies about them too. But I never really gave it a second thought. I don't know exactly what happened with Mary, whether she actually was possessed by some evil spirit or if it was something else. She didn't crawl up the wall, her head didn't spin around, and she didn't talk in a different language. All I could say is that I had this horrible feeling when she walked in the room, her glazed look, the pale skin, and when she answered about those voices that had told her to hurt her family. I will never forget the story, and most of all, I will never forget that awful feeling I had. I hope to never feel that again. It scared the hell out of me. That definitely does sound like a classic, possession of sorts. Whatever this entity was, it was certainly something evil. And I think it's really important to trust that gut feeling we get when we're in the presence of this kind of thing. And when we go to a certain place and we just get that bad feeling, this gut feeling isn't wrong. It's telling us something's just not right there. Whatever it is, it's not right and it's not good. The pendulum calls. This was a really creepy story for me, and it proved to me that paranormal is very real. This happened about 4 years ago, and I picked out my very first pendulum in a store. For those who don't know, you use it as a device to receive answers from what I believe is my subconscious, or so I had thought. So I was using my new Oracle pendulum, and as I asked questions, it swung one way or another. North, south is no, east, west, yes, etc., etc. Well, I started to get on a subject that really didn't have anything to do with my life. It was asking about someone else's, something that I knew we're not supposed to do. So it kept swinging from north, south, then east, west, which I understand to mean that I shouldn't ask or to ask later. But I kept asking and the same result. So finally, I just gave up and went to bed. I remember waking up of a sort of dead, deep sleep, and creepily enough, I just remember the word demon coming to my mind for no real reason other than my strange wake up and the eerie, dim light coming through the window of the room. Immediately, my phone started to dial out the same strange number that went something like 001127673678 or something random like that. It dialed out 3 times. The second time, I knew something was very wrong. And all I could do was lay there and think, oh my God, oh my God. And it rang 5 times for a third call out. After the third call, knock, knock, knock on the headboard behind me. All I could do was sit up as fast as I could, and, like reflux, these words just came out of me. God is with me. God is with me. He is here, came out of my mouth. I am not a religious person. After that, I turned the lamp on and called my significant other. I checked the phone and no record of the dialing out. And to top it off, it had been 3 a.m. when this happened. I still use my pendulum, but I never stray from my own questions now. It's very wise of you to learn your lesson and, not play games with these things. There are kind of hidden rules, so to speak. Some things you just better not do, otherwise there are going to be repercussions. But it sounds like you certainly learnt the lesson, in time before things got worse.